Welcome to The World in 10, the big news stories of the day explained and analysed by the Times of London. Today with Martin Williams and me, Laura Cook.
Donald Trump wants to end the war in Ukraine on his first day in office and devolve abortion laws to individual states. Two major policy statements today, and we'll unpack what they mean. As November edges closer, the world continues to speculate what a second Trump presidency would look like and what that would mean for the war in Ukraine.
Before I even arrive at the Oval Office, I will have the disastrous war between Russia and Ukraine settled. It will be settled quickly.
Donald Trump's plans to end the war on his first day back in the White House involve letting President Putin take over Crimea and the Donbass.
The Times correspondent in Washington, Alistair Dorber, told us these plans have been promised for a while, but with little detail.
What that means in practice, he hasn't detailed until now, which is essentially to withdraw support from Ukraine and encourage them to hand over territory. And that will appall, I think, a lot of people in the States. It will be seen as rewarding Vladimir Putin's aggression. But it might help with some Republicans who believe that the money America's been spending on Ukraine isn't justified and that it's far better to put an end to this conflict, which is becoming more and more attritional as the months go by. I think what Donald Trump's done over the last sort of 24 hours or so is to really lay out some policy positions. They've obviously caused some degree of controversy.
We'll come back to Ukraine in a moment, but first, staying with the topic of Donald Trump and keeping Alistair with us for a little longer, we look at what's become a very controversial topic in America: abortion.
Trump has spoken about the issue before, and some have regarded his position as being more liberal than others within his own party. He said today that rather than a national ban, he wants individual states to decide what works for them. Alistair explains why.
I think this is largely for two reasons. One, there's actually little hope that either Trump in a second term or President Biden can actually pass federal abortion laws. It would require a 2/3 majority in the Senate, which the arithmetic in the polls suggests that neither are capable of winning. It will also appeal, I think, to some on the right, because a lot of Republican-led states have implemented really quite strict abortion rules, in some cases outright bans, but it also upset people on the right as well. What a lot of people on the evangelical right of the Republican Party wanted was a nationwide outright ban on abortion, and Trump's position today will have upset them too.
Kharkiv should be wiped from the face of the earth. The message from the Kremlin following drone raids over the weekend on the Ukrainian city.
The area's been targeted by Russian drones and missiles since February, but this bombing has been the worst yet. It signals Russia's latest strategy, to crush it by blasting it into submission. Over the weekend, 13 people were killed and many civilian targets were hit.
But why Kharkiv? Its proximity to the Donetsk basin and its position at the centre of a network of railways means it holds enormous strategic value. Capturing it would allow Moscow to encircle Ukrainian forces in Donbass. Our correspondent Tom Ball told us about the thinking behind the attacks.
Kharkiv was one of the first targets for the Russians after they launched the full-scale invasion in 2022. It's only about 25 miles south of the Russian border. And it's also predominantly, or at least was predominantly, Russian-speaking. So I think the Russians felt that when they invaded, Kharkiv would rise up and join them, and it'd be a fairly short siege. But in fact, the complete opposite happened. There was kind of a year's worth of a lull in the strikes against it, but the Russians appear to have renewed that from the start of this year, really. And since February, it's just been on a near daily basis, really, that the city's being struck by drones, shells and missile strikes.
Reports in Russian media say the Kremlin is planning to mobilise 300,000 soldiers for a new offensive against the city in the coming months. Ukraine has described the claim as Russian psyops, with President Zelensky insisting the city is not in danger, but admitting it was a desirable target. To Gaza now. Israel's announced it's reducing troop numbers in the south of the territory, and ceasefire talks have resumed in Cairo.
Israel's under growing pressure from the US over how it's operating in Gaza. But does this pullback from areas in the south like Khan Yunis signal an end to the conflict, or is it part of a regrouping ahead of an assault on Rafah?
Sama Alatrush is a Middle East correspondent at The Times.
The Israeli military says that it's a matter of R&R. They're pulling out the troops to rest and recuperate and to prepare them for further missions, including a planned invasion of Rafah. But it does also seem to signal a shift in how Israel wants to operate. What they've been doing is that they've been going into cities, taking them over. Hamas continues to operate and to regroup and gather in areas that were supposedly cleared. So this decision was taken yesterday. The withdrawals happened yesterday, in Khan Yunis, particularly in southern Gaza. So I think what they plan to do is be able to conduct more intelligence-based and specific missions. But for Rafah itself, obviously there's a lot of resistance that's been coming from the U.S. and from other Israeli allies against this operation. Israel keeps vowing to do it, but the U.S. in particular fears a humanitarian disaster. I'm not sure how imminent that operation is, if it's going to happen at all at this point.
That's Sama Alatrush, Middle East correspondent at The Times.
The World Wildlife Fund estimates there are just 27,000 rhinos left in the world.
Poaching and habitat loss mean very few survive outside national parks and reserves.
South Africa spends huge amounts of money trying to protect the population. Now, though, it's come up with a new idea, which some say could help support the natural world, but for others, it's raised a lot of eyebrows.
Jane Flanagan is The Times correspondent in Cape Town. Jane, what's being proposed?
Well, South Africa's government has come up with a wide-ranging environmental strategy that's designed to make its wildlife and other natural assets pay for themselves. And among the ideas it's come up with, and definitely the most contentious, is allowing what it calls medical tourists to have access to powdered rhino horn. As you're probably aware, in parts of Asia, rhino horn is used as a traditional medicine to deal with all sorts of issues, but there's no evidence that the horn has any medicinal properties. Nevertheless, these beliefs do drive an illegal trade in animal parts, and that demand has led to rhinos being poached ever closer to extinction.
Hugely controversial then. What's the reaction been to it?
Well, there are other less controversial ideas in the strategy. The idea about using rhino horn is the most contentious because it's contradictory. As many have pointed out, South Africa can't really be seen to support international bans on trade in rhino, but at the same time be seen to be pushing it to Asian visitors who come to South Africa, especially when they've said there's no medical benefit.
How much of this is about money?
Well, it's all about money. And think about the conservation in South Africa. It's very dominated by the minority white population. South Africa is hugely rich in natural assets, wildlife, plants, and the government have concluded that with its huge unemployment problem, deep inequality between the haves and have-nots, then, it's got to think of more creative ways to use its natural assets.
Jane, thanks for being on The World in 10.
10,000 miles, 16 countries, and almost a year on the road. This is the moment Russell Cook, otherwise known as Hardest Geezer, finished running the length of Africa.
It took the 27-year-old from the UK 352 days to reach the end point on the northern tip of Tunisia. He'd faced visa problems, health scares, and an armed robbery, but he never stopped.
I probably for about 1 minute thought about quitting, and then I realised I couldn't. That's about as close as it ever got. There's obviously been a bunch of times where it was very difficult, but I was never going to quit.
Russell took on his challenge to raise money for charity, but it's fair to say he probably didn't quite know what he'd let himself in for.
I knew it was going to be hard, but I knew I was also going into the unknown, so I had no idea really of how hard it was going to be, but it's safe to say that it surpassed all expectations.
So far, Russell's raised almost $1 million in donations. So what's he going to do next?
I wouldn't be surprised if I start planning some more things in the pretty soon. I've got a whole list of ideas. But I definitely am keen to chill out for a moment.
I think he probably deserves a bit of a rest.
I think I agree. Looks like we've not heard the last of Hardest Geezer.
Thanks for taking 10 minutes to stay on top of the world with the help of the Times of London. See you tomorrow.
You're guaranteed a great mobile deal at Currys. Maybe you want the latest Google Pixel 7 Pro. We've got all the latest handsets. Fancy a change of provider? We've got deals with Vodafone and ID Mobile. Data deals, trade-in deals, cashback deals and more. And because we go beyond expectations, you'll get free next day delivery in most areas too. See for yourself at your local Currys in Crawley or at carphonewarehouse.com. Order before 8 p.m. for free next day delivery, subject to availability, excludes bank holidays.
Tired of ads interrupting your favourite podcasts? Good news. Ad-free listening is available on Amazon Music for all the music plus top podcasts included with your Prime membership. Start listening by downloading the Amazon Music app for free or go to amazon.co.uk/ad-free podcasts. That's amazon.co.uk/ad-free podcasts to catch up on the latest episodes without the ads.